your wedding day is all about you, but it's also all about your partner. And it's also all about your grief. And planning a wedding while grieving requires a different approach than your generic, like, run-of-the-mill sans grief wedding planning. Hi there, grief growers, and welcome back to another episode of Grief Grower. I am so honored to be here with you today talking about this very, very, very close to my heart topic. If you've been growing alongside me for a while, welcome back. And if you are new to me and my work, hello. My name is Shelby Forsythia. I am a grief coach. I'm a two-time author and founder of Life After Loss Academy, and I have helped thousands of grieving people stop feeling lost, stuck, broken, and alone in the aftermath of loss and start building lives that they genuinely love from the lives that loss forced them to live. Here we not only honor death-related losses, but also losses like divorce and breakup, major diagnosis, and any other loss that changes your life. And on this show, we believe that grief is not something to get over, as society so often tells us to do. Just get over it, just move on, just let it go. But that grief is something to not get over, but grow alongside. And that when we stop treating grief less like a thing that's in our way and more like an invitation to live more deeply and to expand ourselves and our hearts, we create these really rich and meaningful lives that honor everything we've faced, everyone we carry with us, and the preciousness of what it means to be alive. And like I said at the top of the show, we're going to be talking about something really special today. My wife and I just celebrated our third wedding anniversary, and I thought, what better time to talk about how to plan a wedding after the death of a loved one than right now, than with 3 years looking back on the day that we were wed. So I'm going to be sharing sort of some ideas, some questions to ponder, some suggestions for honoring grief and loss on your wedding day. This episode's going to be different from some previous episodes where I have talked about things like divorce and diagnosis. This topic got really long, and so I am just sticking to, for all intents and purposes, how to plan a wedding when someone you love, a person or a pet, has died. But I'm sure there is opportunity, plenty of opportunity in the future to talk about how to plan a wedding after you've been divorced, how to plan a wedding after a major diagnosis, how to plan a wedding for insert other major loss here, because wedding is basically just a stand-in for major joyful life milestone. How to have a major joyful life milestone after something awful and heart-wrenching and life-changing has happened. So if this topic is interesting to you, if what I share is helpful today, but you really want to hear me talk about how to plan a wedding after a divorce, or maybe things to keep in mind after a diagnosis in planning for a wedding, let me know, and I can absolutely expand on this and refer back to it when I do. Another sort of disclaimer I want to give at the top here is that I am a non-religious American based in the United States, a grief support coach. So while everything I have to say here is grounded both in personal experience, marrying my wife, and the insights I have in more than 8 years of working with grieving people, it may not include key elements of your cultural spiritual traditions. I may have left some things out. I may miss some things. So take what serves you, add your own spin on things that I say, and please, 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 please fold in and invent your own traditions where needed. So I want to start with talking about why it's so important to talk about why and how wedding planning after a loss can feel so heavy. Like, why it's important to talk about these things together, because a lot of people will talk about grief as a separate topic and wedding planning as a separate topic, but we need to put them together because so many people who are planning weddings, who are uniting their life with somebody else, are also grieving someone or someone's at the same time. And for me, it showed up as this very specific sort of aching. There was this, as I was planning my wedding, my mom died in 2013, I was getting married in 2022. There was this joy and this dread sort of like smashed and tangled together in my chest, and I felt them all the time, and they were clashing and competing against each other in a way that I felt like wouldn't make sense to anybody who hadn't been here before. It was the, oh my God, anticipation of a very, very happy and long future, but sort of tethered to and tugged on by sharply and constantly by this longing for someone, my mother, who only existed in my past. And longtime listeners of this podcast and people who paid attention to my work through the years will also know that my best friend died suddenly from COVID 12 days before my wedding in 2022, and missing her on that day as well was absolutely devastating. I didn't do so much planning 12 days out, and so this article speaks more about the death of my mother than it does about the death of my best friend. But getting ready to get married while grieving is a very specific sort of experience, and one that I think we need to talk about a lot more, because everything's happening all at once. There's the present moment that you're living in. There's all the people and memories that brought you to this place, the past, and then there's this path that's laid out before you and your partner going forward, and you are getting ready to go down it. And you might be a person who's imagined your wedding since childhood, before you even knew who your partner would be, or you might be a person who assumed, maybe because of your loss, that you'd never get married. And regardless which is true, or wherever you fall on that spectrum, you knew from the moment that your person died, or your pet, that a joyful milestone day like this one would probably come down the road, and that they would not be here to commemorate it with you. Again, my mom died in 2013. I was 21. At the time, I was dating somebody that I intended to marry, as we often do in college. And one of the first thoughts I had after my mother's death was, oh my God, she won't be at my wedding. And I have heard so many stories from clients and students after the deaths of their parents or their grandparents or their siblings or their children or their friends or their pets. And there is this heartache in knowing with devastating certainty, no matter what happens, no matter what else changes in my life, that this person or pet that I love will not be with me on one of the most significant days of my life. And when I married my wife, her name is Heather, in 2022, we were missing 9 people between us. She was missing 7, I was missing 2. And every single part of our day together was interwoven by grief. We chose carefully, very intentionally, what kind of wedding we wanted, not just for aesthetics, not just for color schemes, not just for flowers, and not just for sunshine, but for emotional survival, so that we could get through it together. And this podcast episode today is based on our experience, my experience planning a wedding as a grieving person, getting married to a grieving person, and the experiences of other grieving students and clients have shared with me. So please know that the questions and suggestions about planning a wedding while grieving are not about directing you to feel more joy than pain. I'm not trying to change the ratio of your emotional life in this episode. It's about creating space for both things to be true and making room on your wedding day, a day that society tells you should be joyful, should be happy, the very best day of your life, blah, 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 blah. It makes room for the foundations of love in your past, people you may be grieving, places you may be grieving, pets you may be grieving, as you step through this doorway, this life-changing event, and build upon those foundations of love in the future. Getting married is not a doorway where you say, okay, I'm done with that part of my life, I'm stepping into this one now. It is an opportunity for you to, as we talk about on Grief Grower, to expand, to continue to grow, and to have your life get bigger and richer in a way that resonates with you. It's not shutting off. All these people have died and now I'm going into life with this new person. No, that's not what we're doing. It's all these people have died and I'm taking them into my life with this new person. Okay, so the first thing I want to talk about is the structure and format of your wedding. Choosing the right, heavy air quotes on right, type of wedding for your grieving heart. And the big permission slip I want to offer you at the beginning of this is that you do not have to do what everyone else is doing. You don't have to look on Instagram for inspiration. You don't have to compete with your next door neighbor or the person you went to college with, whatever the case may be. A wedding that includes your grief is a wedding that invites you to pause and consider the following questions. Number 1, how much energy do I realistically have to spend? Because grief takes from you in ways that most people cannot see and sometimes understand. And even the planning of something joyful can be exhausting. It costs. There is a grief tax that you pay. And not just, in wedding planning, but like daily life. Things like logistics, numbers, dates, timelines, those are even more important when you're talking about planning a wedding and planning a wedding with grief. So something like a smaller wedding or an elopement might offer you more peace of mind and allow you to be more present with your partner on the day. And if you're looking for inspiration on smaller weddings, you might try searching micro weddings on Google or Pinterest. This is kind of a trend that's popped up in recent years and something that I think even more people will be tilting into, especially as the economy is unstable. World leaders are doing awful things, especially here in the United States. I think people are more interested in having things that feel smaller and more intimate and more energy and resource saving, but also richer in emotional depth and meaning. Second question, under kind of space and format for your wedding, what kind of emotional space do I need? Do you want something that feels quiet or a communal celebration? Would something as big as a wedding party? Wedding planning is basically planning a party. Planning a funeral is basically like planning a party. Planning a wedding is basically like planning a party. Will a party energize or exhaust you? Can you elope now and host a celebration later? Unless your culture or religion dictates a very specific wedding timeline, and some do, feel free to get creative with the timing of your wedding. This could look like having a very small church wedding now and an all-out party the same time next year on your first anniversary. My sister did this during COVID. Or this could look like scheduling like times to pause or times to breathe into the day. These are moments of space where you can be by yourself or alone with your partner between things like hair and makeup or taking pictures or the ceremony, the reception, rounds on the dance floor. Do you or can you schedule times to regularly step away so that you can breathe and be with your heart and like do a little check-in beyond going to the bathroom? Going to the bathroom when you're grieving and at a wedding is not a break. You are often getting out of dresses or getting out of suits, trying to just like do the task of going to the bathroom. That does not constitute a break. I'm talking about a very real scheduled breather that you fold into the day. Third question in this section, who do I want by my side? Because so many of you listening know that when you grieve, your tolerance for surface level relationships just plummets. So choosing people who are going to be at your wedding, who understand the fullness of your heart, everything you're carrying, including the things that may still feel broken on your wedding day. This goes for your wedding party and your guest list, but also applies to service professionals as well. So my wife and I chose to elope, and I'll talk about that later, but we chose a grief-friendly photographer who took so much pressure off us when it came time to take literally, I shit you not, 2 hours worth of photos. And simply reaching out to her with, I'm grieving my best friend, I'm grieving my mother, she's grieving almost every single member of her immediate family. How can you help us honor that emotional experience? This opened doors for all kinds of things that we did not consider. She gave us space to pause. She gave us moments where we could just like take in the scenery before having to smile and turn to the camera. It was so incredibly lovely. So telling this to your service providers for your wedding can open up all kinds of options for things you didn't even think of. So your caterer might offer to make a dessert inspired by a relative's peach cobbler that has long passed. Your DJ might suggest that your end of the night send-off song is your brother's favorite song or favorite band. Your tailor could suggest adding something onto your suit, like extra pockets, so you can carry not only tissues, because we will be crying on our wedding days, but maybe your best friend's antique pocket watch, something custom, so that you have the ability to honor your grief and the joy all at once. Next question here is, where do I want to be? This looks like choosing a location for your wedding that feels emotionally safe. This could mean getting married in your backyard under the tree where your loved one always sat, or maybe somewhere so far away that it holds zero memories about grief or loss. This could be like a destination wedding or something, maybe a place you or your partner has never been before, and so the memory that you make there is the first one that you make together in this place. So as you consider venues, ask yourself, how long will it take to get there, and potentially how much money will it take to get there? How do you feel inside of it when you're there? And does it have the space you need, not only for you and your partner and your guests, but also for your grief? Next question, what time would feel best? And I think this is such an underrated question when it comes to wedding planning in general, but especially wedding planning with grief, because considering what season you'd like to get married in, not just for the venue availability or the types of flowers, but also for how you carry your grief. If winter holidays are hard, I'm thinking of things like Thanksgiving, Hanukkah, Christmas, New Year's, you might choose to get married in May instead of December. If Father's Day feels really shitty to you, perhaps September is a better fit for you than June when Father's Day occurs. You could also expand this idea and consider getting married. A lot of people do things like getting married on a loved one's birthday or their anniversary so that you have a shared celebration date in common. A lot of people will get married on a grandparent's or a parent's wedding anniversary date, and that can feel like a good omen all the way around. My wife and I chose to get married on May 25th or 525 because palindromes remind us of our parents. So the words mom and dad, MOMDOD, are both palindromes. They're spelled the same backwards as they are forwards. So 525 is also a palindrome. We also chose to get married at 9:15 in the morning. Because that's when our energy was the highest. We felt the most ready for the day, first thing in the morning. And so we took photos, we had tacos for lunch, and we got tattoos. We then went down for the count and took a nap at our hotel at 3 o'clock. And it was so nice, especially after the unexpected death of my best friend, to be able to sleep before getting back up and dressing up for wedding dinner. This was a very, very intentional part of our day. As we start early. We're getting hair and makeup done at 6 in the morning. We're getting married at 9. We're getting photos taken. We are living a whole life. And then by 3 p.m., you get the chance to sleep and to rest. And I have not heard anybody else have a wedding like that. But I'll tell you, as a grieving person, already coming into this, and then who was unexpectedly grieving about 2 weeks before, again, a fresh loss, a new loss, having pre-planned rest in the middle of the day absolutely felt like a lifesaver and a game changer. The second really big kind of umbrella topic I want to talk about here is clothing, because this is something that has so much meaning and memory for people around their wedding day. I mean, people are passing down wedding dresses and suits from decades ago, or jewelry or things like that. And so considering what you'd like to wear and how you'd like to wear it is a really lovely way to think about how to honor loved ones on a wedding day. So one question to ask yourself might be, can I repurpose something that I already love? So this could be your father's cufflinks. You might reimagine a dress from that belonged to your mom or your grandmother or an aunt or another matriarch in your family. Maybe you sew the tag from your pet's collar or a swatch of a child's favorite pair of overalls into your suit jacket so that when you open up, you can see it there. And something I really love about clothing too is you don't have to have something already. A lot of folks who have faced natural disasters do not have access to memorial clothing or clothing that belonged to a loved one. You can also stitch new meaning directly onto fabric. So things like initials or flowers or flags or symbols or handwriting can all be embroidered onto different kinds of fabrics. I'm thinking dresses or suits or hats or veils or pocket squares. If your shoes are made of kind of a bendy fabric like a canvas or something, you can even embroider things like shoes. And this is such a neat way, if you don't have access to a loved one's clothing, or you never had access to it, or you lost it through another major grief event, this is a way to bring your loved one with you, even if you don't have articles of clothing or items that belong to them. When we got married, Heather chose to wear her dad's tartan, it's like a Scottish stripe pattern, suspenders, for our wedding. We did a few photos with her suit jacket off, and it was really, really beautiful to see her dad's presence, and by proxy, kind of like his whole lineage's presence on full display. She also lost her paternal grandparents. And if you don't want to alter the clothing that you're wearing, and if you don't have the energy to like sew new things onto clothing you're wearing, you might also do something like displaying a loved one's clothing. I recently saw an Instagram reel where the bride and her partner put together like a mannequin display of her mother and her mother-in-law's bridal gowns at a special table during cocktail hour with photos of them on their wedding day. So kind of like the generation up before that. And so they became conversation pieces that their guests could talk about and that they could have in the room with them as they were getting married. And so there's all kinds of ways that you can incorporate clothing into your wedding, and this can fold into your wedding planning as well. Other things to consider is if you have accessories that can carry your loved ones with you. Things like honoring a loved one through jewelry or watches or shoes or glasses, but also things that are like less seen. So like the way you do your hair or perfume or cologne, these can all invoke the presence and the essence of someone who's no longer here. And these details can be like unspoken portable altars that you carry with you throughout your wedding day. So something I like to talk about is both my engagement ring and wedding ring contained diamonds from my mom and from Heather's mom as well. And Heather's wedding band is her mom's wedding band that got a nice fresh polish. She just basically took the wedding band that her mom wore all throughout her life and said, "Can you polish the scuffs out of this?" And then she wears that now as her wedding ring. And so literally reusing jewelry. You do not always need something new. And we just had our jeweler engrave very shallowly little engravings of our handwriting on the inside of our rings, so that they had an even more special touch to them. But in terms of needing to have things be brand new, not the case with weddings. And so every time I look down at my fingers, I don't just see myself and my wife, I see our parents as well. And it's something that's really beautiful, that I love about how we chose to put our wedding together. This next section is my favorite. Because, as some of you know, not all of you might know this, but I'm a freelance florist. One of my first jobs here in Chicago was as a floral designer, and it continues to be something I do on the weekends for fun, is flowers. Talking about the flowers that you use in weddings, because there's a lot of symbolic meaning behind flowers, and I won't go into like what every single flower means, but choosing specific flowers can help you bring the memories of people you love and pets you love closer to you. So the first question you can ask in the flower department is, are there flowers that are significant to you? You might select ones that your person loved or that remind you of them. A lot of people think of things like lilacs or peonies for a mother or grandmother are very popular. A lot of kids like things like daisies, so incorporating daisies in a wedding bouquet is really fun. And even if your florist can't get in a specific flower, lilacs are not in season year round. Sometimes also things like flowers can be expensive, or they're not available, or the wholesaler's out of them, or maybe they just don't hold up well out of water. I'm thinking things like hydrangeas. You are beautiful puffballs, but every time you're out of water, you just wilt and go to pieces. You can always explore things like dried or artificial flowers. Both my sister and I incorporated artificial flowers on our wedding day. My sister's wedding bouquet was entirely artificial flowers, and she incorporated some artificial Queen Anne's lace, which was our mom's favorite, into her bouquet. And for my wedding, I wanted my favorite flowers, which are black-eyed Susans, and my wife Heather really wanted lavender, and neither of those things is in season in May in Chicago. So I ordered artificial ones from an online store, just like a florist website. And you can also do this from Etsy, Michael's, any craft store that's in your area. And then I folded in these fake flowers alongside real flowers. Roses, there's a blooming branch called spirea, ranunculus, stock, even some wildflowers in there. From the pictures, you have no idea which flowers are fake and which flowers are real. And the effect was, it felt like both of us and all the people that we love were represented in the flowers. Another thing that you can do, and I loved when people asked us to do this when I worked at a few like retail flower shops, is adding photos or like small tokens or memorabilia to your personal flowers. And I say personal flowers, but these are things that you carry or wear. So tiny lockets or charms or ribbons with initials sewn on them can be woven or included on bouquets or boutonnieres or pocket squares, sometimes even flower crowns if you want to do a flower crown for a wedding, especially if you are a person who is walking down the aisle at a wedding. It can feel really special to gently like have your thumb on the charm on your bouquet, or put your hand over the locket that's been tucked into part of the boutonniere on your heart. It's just a physical memento of, you are with me, I am with you. We are not separated on this day. And then the last bit under flowers here is color. Color is such a fun way to include somebody that you love. So maybe purple was your sister's favorite color, or your grandfather always gifted you yellow roses on every occasion. So if it feels right, and if it's something your partner is into, let your choice of color guide your palette for your wedding. And something that's really neat is in the United States, sympathy flowers and wedding flowers are generally the same color, white. So a simple classic all white palette, if you don't want to think about how to include all these colors on your wedding day, going all white can do sort of a double duty in terms of color scheme. You are joyful, you are celebrating, you are starting fresh, which is kind of the symbol of a wedding. You are also mourning at the same time, and just having the color white anywhere in your day can really contribute to that, sending a dual message, even if you're the only one who's thinking about that on the day. All right, the next section I want to get into here is about words, because I can't I can't do a wedding episode without talking about the words that we say on our wedding day. So speaking words that honor both grief and joy. So whether you're religious or spiritual or completely secular, things like readings or writings like in your vows, can help capture how deep and rich the emotional complexity of the day is. So the first thing I would do if I were you is sort of take an inventory, make a list of who's going to be speaking, including you, don't forget yourself, on your wedding day, and then ask yourself the following questions. Number one, can I incorporate popular poetry or literature? Especially if you're a reader, this might be something that resonates with you because there's a lot of poets and authors that have written books that reflect themes of memory or grief or enduring love. I'm thinking Mary Oliver, Pablo Neruda, Rilke, Ocean Vuong. There are so many different folks over the years and contemporary who have written things about grief. And you might even go back and listen to my podcast episode with William Bortz. We talked about Mother's Day and poetry together for inspiration on poets to consider as you are thinking about whose words to include on your wedding day. Second question, would I like to read a letter or journal entry written by the person I'm missing? And make sure this letter or journal entry is something they would have wanted read out loud. Like, don't go reading their private diaries at the reception. But things like love letters or stories or jokes are almost always appropriate to read at weddings. And if you are not personally able to read a loved one's words without falling to pieces, although if you're going to cry on any day, cry on your wedding day, you might enlist a friend or family member to read this journal entry or this story from a loved one as a part of your ceremony or the reception, or you might even incorporate them somehow, maybe a line or two, into your vows. Third question, are there religious or spiritual texts that resonate with me? And while they're not comforting for everybody, not everybody wants God at their wedding, words that come from or feel like they come from a higher power, if they're comforting to you, can feel like something solid on a very griefy day. And even if you aren't religious, a verse or a blessing from your loved one's tradition, whatever religious or spiritual or cultural tradition they're a part of, can feel grounding. Number 4, would I like to write a custom reading? If you have an officiant or master of ceremonies, somebody who's kind of guiding the day for you with their words, supplying them with statements that set the space that you're in can feel very helpful when it comes to honoring not only your grief, but the griefs of all the other friends and family members in the room. Because I'll guarantee you this, on your wedding day, you will not be the only one grieving. These could include things like a warm welcome to everyone who loves this couple, including those who passed on. There are some who cannot be here today, and the couple carries their love with them into their marriage. Or we honor everyone, living and gone, who showed the couple what it means to love. And I like tear up saying things like this because it's so special to just for 2 freaking seconds acknowledge that there is everyone who is in this room or in this space right now, and everyone who is in this room and in this space right now is here and informed by and surrounded by, whether you believe in an afterlife or not, those we have come from. And just acknowledging their space in the room can make a wedding feel so much deeper and so much richer and so much less like something that you must look joyful for the fun of it, but something that's really been informed by and is special because of who loved you and where you came from. I want to get into now a lot of people's favorite parts of thinking about wedding planning, and that is putting together rituals or memorials. A lot of people, especially around like holiday seasons, not necessarily for weddings, talk about the presence of the empty chair. And so what do you do when there's a chair in the audience or a chair or a space standing up next to you in a wedding party that's empty? So things like memorials and rituals, whether they're things that have been set up and left there, I call them static setups, or action-oriented gestures, things you do to acknowledge your grief, are beautiful ways to honor grief's presence on your wedding day. In terms of kind of this first category, fixed or static memorials, these are set up in one place for you and your guests to appreciate. You might do something like the empty chair. A memorial chair with like a photo, a flower, a candle, these are very common, and leaving a note or a program at the seat, at the empty chair, explaining what it is and its significance during your day. This can also be a way, if you are getting married kind of in front of an audience, for you to look out at the audience and not see an empty chair, but something that is full of their presence, something that you've designed intentionally to be there looking back at you. Kind of similar, you could also do a memory table that has framed photos or handwritten notes or candles or objects that belong to your person. This is especially helpful if you and your partner have lost a lot of people between you or have a great lineage of people that you'd like to honor on your wedding day. You could also do something virtual, digital, like a slideshow or a memory wall, and this lets people kind of walk by or point at photos or notice themselves in pictures in a way that honors your loved ones and their role in your life, and also kind of invites people into a space that's dedicated for sharing those kinds of grief stories. If you are more interested in performing an action or adding an action onto a static memorial or static ritual, you could do something like light a candle together or invite guests to light candles all at once. You could release doves or butterflies. If you're doing this, please do it ethically and responsibly. You can find out more by Googling ethical butterfly release, ethical dove release in your area. As a way to support that. I don't know a lot about it, but I do know there are better and worse ways to do that. Also, please don't release balloons. They're bad for the environment. So release doves or butterflies or something else to symbolize transition and love and continuation. You might play a favorite song of loved ones during a quiet moment or do a dance in their honor. I'm thinking of a lot of folks who've lost a parent will dance with another parent, or who've lost a grandparent will dance with the other grandparent and vice versa. There's a lot of different ways to kind of swap out roles, but have the dance be a song that was significant to your loved one or to all of you. You might also do something like pour out a ceremonial drink. This could be wine or tea or whiskey in a loved one's memory, and let that first metaphorical sip be for them or in their honor. Or you might plant something. It kind of depends on the venue. If it's your backyard, it's probably a go. If it's like a public garden, probably not. They'll come behind you and dig it up after you're gone. But something like planting a tree or flowers or herbs as a part of the ceremony or reception can feel really, really special, and like you are doing something that honors the past while also moving forward into the future, something that grows. Memorials and rituals, just in general, are really also great jobs to give trusted friends and family who say things like, let me know if there's anything I can do to help. That dreaded sentence that grieving people hear time and time again. But if somebody comes to you and says, let me know if there's anything I can do to help, and you genuinely trust them with one of these tasks, you might employ your techie cousin to put together a slideshow, or you might call up your uncle who is a landscaper and say, hey, can you source a tree from this nursery? Whatever you choose to do in terms of memorial and ritual, it's not necessarily about what you do. It's about the intention that you have behind it and how it honors your grief and the person or people who have died, or pets who have died, that you are bringing with you into this day. Some thoughts I want to leave you with, because I know I just dumped a whole bunch of information about wedding stuff onto you in the midst of grief. And if you're not getting married anytime soon, or if you've been married before, maybe you're grieving a spouse, this episode isn't for you, that's okay. Thank you for listening this far. And also, if you know anybody getting married in the near future, I would love it if you shared this episode with them, because whether they or their partner are grieving, it's a really, really helpful tool to have in your back pocket when you're planning and have also experienced some sort of loss. The thing I want to leave you with is that your wedding day is all about you, but it's also all about your partner, and it's also all about your grief. There's a lot of people riding in the metaphorical car that is following that path into the future for you. And planning a wedding while grieving requires a different approach than your generic, like, run-of-the-mill sans grief wedding planning, because grief in and of itself demands space and time to pause and consider things and ponder and create and to remember and feel. And that's not a bad thing. It's very human to grieve on your wedding day and every other day, but it does mean that this process is going to require a little bit more energy and a bit more consideration from you. And as a grieving person, I cannot tell you in enough words how grateful I am to have planned a grief-honoring wedding with a partner who is also grieving. I always say, if you want to date and marry a good person, date a griever. Grievers are worth dating. And this is not necessarily universal advice. I know that some grieving people are not the kindest people in the world. It is not a universal statement. And I think a lot of society will discount grievers as damaged goods or broken, or you've had your chance to be married and then your spouse died, or you experienced another major loss. And they don't see grieving people as people who act with more intention, or act with more care, or act with more love and history of loss in mind, but it is something I deeply treasure. Like, it is something I will say from the rooftops for as long as I live. If you want somebody who's there for you in sickness and in health, marry a griever. A griever who has welcomed their grief into their life and, like I said at the top of the show, built a beautiful life that they love from the one that loss forced them to live. That is a person worth building a life alongside. I gotta tell you, when Heather and I got married, it felt as if all of our loved ones got to come along for the ride, even Tammy, who I had recently lost 12 days before our wedding, and we could both sense it throughout the whole day. We felt as if everything we did and everywhere we went was somewhere that was also accompanied by all the people that we lost. So as you plan your wedding together, as you're listening to this podcast, as you're watching this on YouTube, you might even go over to shelbyforsythia.com and read the accompanying blog for this episode. My hope for you is that you and your partner make loads and loads of room for grief to come along for the ride in your own wedding. Because somehow, and I still cannot fully understand why, grief shared, especially grief shared with a partner, is grief lightened. I hope that this checklist, that this episode has been a helpful guide and a starting point for making room for your loss and your loved one on a big milestone day. And whether you're in the lead up to a wedding, you've already gotten married, you have no need for this episode, but you listened anyway. No matter where you are in grief, if you're looking for even more tips and tools for navigating life with grief, plus weekly live coaching from me where I'll take your questions on grief and living life after loss, I hope you'll join us in Life After Loss Academy. There, I will walk you through my signature 5-step grief method for re-establishing, reorienting, rebuilding after loss, and address all of your struggles about life after loss, including honoring your loved ones, releasing really heavy, difficult, painful emotions. I'm thinking things like anger, guilt, regret, despair, and also moving forward in the way that works best for you. I would love to see you there. That's all for this episode of Grief Grower. Thank you so much for joining me today. If you're looking for grief support beyond this show, you can find free workshops, blog articles, and my signature What's Your Grief Support Style quiz at shelbyforsythia.com/links. If this podcast felt comforting, educational, or otherwise helpful to you or someone you know getting married soon, please subscribe and leave a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And be sure to share this show with a friend because you never know what someone you love is going through. A huge thank you to the Grief Growers community for supporting the show on Patreon. If you'd like to join them and help me keep this show free from ads for mattresses and meal delivery kits because grief is hard enough without commercials, head to patreon.com/shelbyforsythia. As a Patreon supporter, you get to help me choose new topics and guests for the show, and you are the first to get behind-the-scenes access to all of my upcoming projects, like my new book, which is coming out in 2026. Grief Grower is hosted by yours truly, Shelby Forsythia, and our music is composed by Addie Goldstein. Until next time, I see you. I am so proud of you and the work that you're doing in the world, and I love you. Because even through grief, we are growing.